Imagine sitting in this like really high stakes boardroom. You've just delivered a presentation that you spent 6 meticulously agonizing months preparing for.
Right. Just brutal amounts of prep.
Exactly. And the data is bulletproof. The senior partners are all nodding. Someone slides a coffee across this huge mahogany table, smiles, and tells you that you just absolutely crushed it.
Best feeling in the world. Or well, it should be.
It should be. But in that exact moment of ultimate professional triumph, your internal monologue is not celebrating, like at all. Instead, your brain is just screaming, they bought it. I completely winged that. And any second now, someone is going to realize I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing.
Oh, yeah. The classic internal panic.
We have all been in some version of that room, And what we are going to do today is decode the invisible architecture of those specific moments. So welcome to the deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us today.
Really excited to get into this one.
So our mission today is to explore how the exact language we use, the specific vocabulary we deploy, actively constructs our reality, both the reality echoing inside our own heads and the reality we project out into the broader world.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that we often treat language as this passive tool, like a mirror just reflecting what's already happening.
Right, just describing the room.
Exactly. But when you examine really complex professional environments, whether that's a corporate leadership summit or a high-level scientific debate or even just negotiating your own worth internally, language is not a mirror. It is the engine.
The engine. I love that.
Yeah, because it dictates the boundaries of what you actually believe you are capable of. And it completely governs how much friction you encounter when you're navigating conflict with others.
Which is exactly why we are pulling from some really incredible material today. It's an advanced English language and debate lab designed for native level mastery. Because, look, once you reach a certain level in your career, you already know the technical jargon of your industry, right? Mm-hmm. You know the data.
Right. The textbook stuff is handled.
Yeah, the true bottleneck to your advancement isn't a lack of basic vocabulary. It's a lack of psychological and interpersonal nuance. So, we're going to set a clear agenda for you today. First, we're going straight into the mind to look at internal communication, specifically the psychology of imposter syndrome.
Which is huge.
Huge. Then we'll shift to interpersonal communication and look at the delicate art of the diplomatic interruption. And finally, we'll apply all those debate skills to a really contentious societal issue from our source material, which is corporate greenwashing.
It's a perfect progression from the inside out.
Exactly. And to help us unpack not just what these advanced terms mean, but why they reveal so much about human psychology, we have our expert here. Because reaching a high level of mastery isn't just memorizing flashcards.
No, not at all. It's about understanding the cultural context, the subtext, the things people aren't saying out loud.
For sure. So let's start inside the mind. Before we can even begin to debate global corporate issues, we have to look at how we talk to ourselves in the workplace. Let's unpack that boardroom scenario I mentioned earlier.
The one where you feel like you just winged it?
Yeah, because it highlights a psychological phenomenon that almost everyone listening has wrestled with at some point. Imposter syndrome.
Right, which is basically this pervasive, deeply seated anxiety that your competence is just an illusion. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Waiting to be exposed as a total fraud. And the source material we are analyzing today captures this dynamic so brilliantly. It zooms in on the aftermath of a major career win.
Yeah, there's this dialogue where a colleague is showering a high achiever with, completely well-deserved praise for a promotion and a stellar presentation.
And what does the high achiever do? Their immediate knee-jerk response is to dismiss it entirely. They literally tell their colleague they felt like they completely winged it.
Winged it, which is such a wild thing to say in that context.
Okay, let's unpack this right now. Because the choice of that specific phrase, winging it, is mathematically absurd here.
Oh, totally absurd.
Right, like we know from the text, this person spent 6 months poring over spreadsheets, conducting market research, doing endless rehearsals. There is a literal mountain of empirical evidence proving their preparation.
Right, they had the receipt.
They have the receipts. So to look at a half year of grueling, deliberate effort and label it as winging it, I mean, that isn't just humility. It's a severe cognitive distortion.
It really is. It's an active rewriting of history to protect the imposter narrative.
Protect a narrative, what do you mean?
Well, the person experiencing this isn't lying to their colleague, right? They genuinely feel that way. They are experiencing this massive disconnect between their objective output, the amazing presentation, and their internal emotional state.
Wow. Okay, so the feeling is real, even if the facts contradict it.
Exactly. When they say they winged it, they are expressing the feeling of internal chaos. Because those 6 months of preparation felt messy. They were filled with dead ends and moments of confusion and constant revisions. So to them, it didn't feel like a smooth, genius process. It felt like chaos.
Oh man, that makes me think of like a classic stage play.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Imagine you are the lead in this massive theatrical production. The lights are blinding, the theater is packed with people, and the play is flowing beautifully. But you, standing right there center stage, have this overwhelming, sickening feeling that you are the only actor who somehow never got a script.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
Right. You feel like you are just making up your lines as you go, sweating bullets, just desperately hoping the other actors will play along, while everyone else around you is completely off book, perfectly reciting their memorized lines.
That is a brilliant analogy.
But the irony, of course, is that you are the playwright. You wrote the script, you've rehearsed it for half a year. But the internal terror of improvisation just completely eclipses the reality of your preparation.
Yeah, and that theater analogy perfectly isolates the core mechanism of imposter syndrome. It's this assumption of universal competence in others, contrasted against the acute awareness of your own internal friction.
Right. You only feel your own sweat. You don't feel anyone else's.
Exactly. And the dialogue we're looking at nails this with a really highly descriptive phrase. The supportive colleague in the text observes that high achievers carry this heavy assumption that everyone else has it perfectly figured out, while they are the only ones secretly, and this is the quote, floundering behind the scenes.
Floundering behind the scenes. Man, it's such a visceral image.
It really is.
And I feel like it explains so much about modern white-collar work. No, you look across the open plan office or you're staring at the Zoom grid, and all you see are polished exteriors.
Just perfect lighting and nice backgrounds.
Yeah. You see the final glossy PDF report. You see the confident pitch. You do not see their deleted drafts or their panicked 2 a.m. Google searches or their moments of crushing self-doubt. You only have a front row seat to your own floundering.
And this creates a devastating feedback loop for high achievers. Because they only see the polished outcome of others and the chaotic process of themselves, they attribute other people's success to innate brilliance.
Oh, they're just naturally a genius.
Right. But they attribute their own success to luck or timing or just a really successful deception.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because logically, it feels like that should eventually break down.
How so?
Well, if you keep succeeding, like if you get the promotion, secure the massive funding, launch the product, shouldn't that empirical evidence eventually rewire your brain? Shouldn't a massive string of wins essentially cure the feeling of being a fraud?
You would think so, right. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, success actually compounds the problem.
It really makes it worse.
It makes it worse because it raises the stakes. When an individual with imposter syndrome gets a promotion, they don't experience it as validation. They experience it as a higher ledge from which they will eventually be pushed.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly dark, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. They feel like they have now fooled a higher caliber of executives, which means the inevitable exposure will be even more catastrophic. The anxiety doesn't dissipate at all. It scales up with the job title.
Which brings us to a psychological trap that I found absolutely fascinating in our material today. Because the brain cannot tolerate cognitive dissonance for long. It has to find a way to reconcile the objective success with the internal feeling of being a fraud.
Right. It has to close that gap.
And the way it achieves that is through a process of aggressive self-sabotage known as moving the goalposts.
Yeah. Moving the goalposts, such a crucial concept.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it is the immediate, almost involuntary devaluation of an achievement the second it is unlocked. By moving the goalposts, you arbitrarily change the rules or the expectations so that success is suddenly harder to achieve. You customize a moving target that you can never actually hit.
Our source material illustrates this with a painfully relatable example. So, the individual gets the coveted promotion. That was the original goalpost.
Right. The thing they've been working toward for years.
Exactly. For years, they told themselves, if I can just make senior director, I will finally be legitimate. And then they get the title.
And they celebrate, right?
Nope. Instead of popping champagne and resting in that legitimacy, their brain instantaneously pivots. It says, sure, you got the promotion, but you still don't know how to code in Python.
Yeah, there it is.
Real senior directors understand Python. Therefore, you are still a fraud.
It's a ruthless internal standard because it demands this ever-expanding, completely impossible omniscience.
Omniscience. You literally have to know everything to feel safe.
Exactly. And the fact that knowing Python might have absolutely zero relevance to their daily operational duties is completely ignored. The brain just scans the horizon for any gap in knowledge, no matter how obscure, and weaponizes that gap to invalidate the overarching achievement.
It's just a machine designed to keep you feeling inadequate.
Precisely. It ensures the individual remains in a perpetual state of inadequacy.
It is absolute madness, yet, we all do it. So how do we break this cycle? Because we can't just walk around the office completely paralyzed by the fear that we are one Python coding test away from losing our careers.
No, you'd burn out in a month.
Right. There has to be a cognitive reframe. And there is a brilliant turning point in the dialogue we are analyzing that provides this kind of escape hatch.
Yes, it revolves around a revelation concerning the regional director.
Right. So the supportive colleague in the scenario shares an anecdote. They talk about having an informal drink with this regional director. And this is someone who occupies the absolute apex of the corporate hierarchy in their world.
Right. This is the person who presumably radiates just untouchable authority, the one who evaluates everyone else's performance.
The ultimate final boss of the corporate ladder.
Perfect way to describe them.
And what does this incredibly intimidating figure admit over a drink? He explicitly confesses that he still feels like he's faking his way through half of his days.
Yeah. And that admission completely shatters the fundamental premise of imposter syndrome.
How so?
Because the imposter operates on the belief that there is this secret club of professionals who possess total clarity, complete knowledge, and zero self-doubt. The regional director's confession reveals that this club simply does not exist.
Which forces us to completely redefine what competence actually looks like.
Yeah.
And the material gives us a definition that I literally want to frame and hang on my wall.
It's so good.
It argues that competence isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting your ability to figure things out when things go wrong.
That distinction is paramount. Because if you define competence as possessing all the answers in advance, you will always be a fraud. The modern professional landscape is way too complex and volatile for anyone to have all the answers.
Changes every 5 minutes anyway.
Exactly. But if you redefine competence as a capacity for resilience and problem solving and the ability to navigate the unknown, then the floundering isn't a sign of failure. The floundering is just the necessary friction of doing difficult work.
Yes, the floundering is the job. You didn't get your role by accident or through some massive administrative error in HR.
Right. They didn't just pull your name out of a hat.
No. You earned it because you have a documented historical track record of walking into ambiguous, chaotic situations and eventually figuring them out. The true professionals, the ones who actually survive and thrive, aren't the ones who never feel lost. They are the ones who have made peace with the fact that they will frequently have to navigate without a map.
And they trust their own capacity to eventually find true north. It shifts the internal narrative from, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm a fraud, to, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but my history suggests I will figure it out. It is a profound neurological shift from panic to curiosity.
So, okay, we've done the internal work, we've managed the imposter syndrome, we've stopped moving the goalposts on ourselves, and we've completely redefined our competence.
We're feeling good.
We're feeling great. But here is where the rubber meets the road. Because we do not work in a vacuum, we have to take this newly calibrated internal reality and project it into a highly competitive, fast-paced external environment.
Right. The real world.
Yeah. How do you assert yourself in a room full of strong personalities, especially when you need to disagree with them?
That transition from internal self-regulation to external interpersonal strategy is so critical. And the material tackles this by dissecting a very specific, high-level functional speaking skill.
The diplomatic interruption.
The diplomatic interruption, yes.
So here's the scenario for you listening. You are in a dynamic, high-stakes meeting. Maybe it's a board meeting or a critical project post-mortem. People are passionate. The adrenaline is high. Ideas are just flying across the table.
Everyone wants to be heard.
Right. And you recognize a massive flaw in the current strategy being proposed. you need to speak up. But if you just sit there waiting for a polite 3-second lull in the conversation.
You're going to be waiting until the janitor turns the lights off.
Exactly. That silence is never coming.
The passive approach is guaranteed to fail in those environments. The momentum of the conversation will simply roll right over you. You are required to interject.
You have to.
But the mechanics of how you interject determine whether your idea is actually adopted or immediately rejected.
Because if you resort to bluntness, if you just throw your hand up and say, stop, you're wrong, we need to do this instead. I mean, you might stop the conversation, but you've instantly lost the room.
Oh, you've triggered a massive threat response. When a speaker is bluntly cut off, their brain literally perceives it as an attack on their status and their autonomy.
So they stop listening to your idea entirely.
The substantive content of your brilliant idea becomes completely irrelevant because the speaker's cognitive resources are now entirely devoted to defending their ego and regaining control of the floor.
Wow.
You've turned a collaborative strategy session into a dominance hierarchy battle.
It makes me think of merging onto a busy highway.
Oh, another analogy. Let's hear it.
Okay, so you are on the on-ramp, right?
Yeah.
And the traffic is moving at 75 miles an hour, bumper to bumper. You have to get into that flow of
You
traffic.
can't just stay on the ramp.
Right. But if you just crank the steering wheel and violently swerve into the middle lane, that's a blunt interruption.
Yeah.
You are going to cause a massive pileup.
Horns blaring.
Horns are blaring, people are furious, and the entire flow of traffic grinds to a halt. But on the flip side, you can't just put your car in park on the on-ramp and wait for the highway to magically empty out. That's the passive approach.
Both extremes, the violent swerve and the parked car, completely fail to achieve the objective of joining the journey.
Right, so what is the actual solution? You use your turn signal, you accelerate to match the speed of the traffic, you put on your blinker to broadcast your intent, you make eye contact in the mirror, and you smoothly slide into the gap.
You allow the other drivers the necessary split second to adjust their speed without slamming on their brakes.
Exactly. And in the realm of advanced communication, we have specific vocabulary that acts as our linguistic turn signals.
The material refers to these as hedging phrases or diplomatic interruptions, and these are highly calibrated strings of words designed specifically to navigate conversational friction.
So let's look at some examples from the text.
Let's examine the architecture of a few specific phrases used at the highest levels of professional discourse. The first one highlighted is, if I could just jump in here.
If I could just jump in here. I mean, it is incredibly smooth. But let's break down why it works so well psychologically.
Every single word in that phrase is doing heavy lifting to lower the other person's defenses. It begins with if, which frames the interruption as a conditional request rather than a unilateral demand.
It offers the illusion of choice, like, oh, you don't have to let me, but if I could.
Exactly. Then we have the word just, which acts as a minimizer. It signals to the speaker, do not panic. I am not trying to steal your spotlight for the next 10 minutes. This will only take a tiny moment.
Right, it's just a quick thing.
And finally, jump in is a collaborative phrasal verb. You aren't building a wall to stop their momentum. You are jumping into the stream to swim alongside them.
It is literal emotional intelligence encoded directly into syntax. It's brilliant. The second phrase they highlight is even more fascinating to me, honestly.
Which one is that?
Not to derail the conversation, but
Oh, yes. That phrase is an absolute masterclass in preemptive validation.
it really is. Think about the word derail. A train is moving on a track with a specific destination. By saying not to derail, you are explicitly acknowledging the value of the current speaker's destination.
You are telling them, I see where you are taking this.
Right. I respect the momentum you've built, and I promise I am not trying to wreck the train. You validate their leadership in the moment, which makes them infinitely more receptive to the slight detour you were about to suggest.
It demonstrates that you have been actively engaged in their point. You aren't just sitting there waiting for your turn to speak. You are participating in the ecosystem of their argument.
Which is the whole point of a conversation.
Right. This is the hallmark of true communicative competence. True mastery isn't about wielding a massive vocabulary to bludgeon your colleagues into submission. It's about navigating complex power dynamics with grace, ensuring that the best idea wins without leaving a trail of bruised egos in your wake.
So we have our toolkit. We have the psychological framework to silence our inner imposter, and we have the linguistic turn signals to politely but firmly assert ourselves in any room.
We are fully equipped.
We are. Now, what happens when we take these highly advanced skills and apply them to a deeply contentious real-world argument?
Because the material doesn't just leave us in the abstract.
Yeah.
It forces us to watch these tools deployed in a heavy, heavy debate.
And the arena for this debate is one of the most complex corporate phenomena of our modern era, the concept of greenwashing.
Greenwashing.
Now, before we jump into this scenario, I want to establish a very clear boundary for you listening. Greenwashing, environmental policy, corporate regulation, these are intensely polarizing political issues.
Oh, very heated.
Our goal here is absolutely not to take a stance or endorse a viewpoint or tell you what your environmental politics should be. We are acting as entirely neutral observers today.
Right. Our mission is strictly to analyze how the individuals in this scenario construct their arguments, how they use the diplomatic tools we just discussed, and how vocabulary is used to shape perception.
We are dissecting the rhetoric and the strategy, not advocating for the underlying policies. So with that said, to set the stage, the material defines greenwashing as a corporate strategy, where a company invests significantly more resources into marketing themselves as environmentally friendly than they actually invest in reducing their negative environmental impact.
It is the deliberate weaponization of language and imagery to create a disparity between public perception and operational reality.
The scenario provided in our source is a dialogue between two colleagues. Let's call them Speaker A and Speaker B.
Okay.
So Speaker A comes into the office wearing a brand new jacket from a company heavily promoting its eco-friendly initiatives. And the core marketing hook of this company is that for every single item purchased, they plant a tree.
Nice and simple. Buy a jacket, plant a tree.
Exactly. Speaker A admits that knowing a tree was planted made the purchase feel much better. It essentially alleviated that modern hum of consumer guilt.
Which is an incredibly powerful psychological lever. Consumers are increasingly aware of global environmental degradation, and that awareness naturally breeds anxiety and guilt.
You feel bad just buying a cup of coffee.
Right. So when a corporation offers a product that acts as an absolution of that guilt, the marketing becomes irresistible. Speaker A is engaging in what we'd call pragmatic, feel-good consumption.
But Speaker B has read an independent expose on this specific company. Speaker B knows that despite the tree planting initiative, the company's supply chain is deeply reliant on highly exploitative labor practices and heavily polluting fossil fuels.
So Speaker B has a problem.
A big problem.
Right.
Speaker B has to introduce this highly confrontational information. But look at how they do it. They don't walk up and say, "You fell for a scam, you're wearing a sweatshop jacket."
Which would be the blunt swerving into traffic interruption.
Exactly. Instead, they use one of our hedging techniques. They say, not to boost your bubble, but...
That is the diplomatic interruption deployed perfectly in a high-tension scenario. Think about the idiom bursting a bubble. It implies destroying a fragile, happy illusion.
It's a very vivid image.
It is. By leading with, "not to burst your bubble," Speaker B is demonstrating intense empathy. They are acknowledging Speaker A's positive emotional state regarding the jacket, and they are expressing a polite reluctance to disrupt that joy, even though they feel ethically obligated to share the contradictory facts of the expose.
It softens the blow of the reality check.
It does.
And once they are in the conversation, Speaker B begins to deconstruct the company's marketing vocabulary. Which brings us to the analytical concept of buzzwords.
Buzzwords are so interesting to unpack.
The material highlights words like sustainable, conscious, and earth-friendly that were printed literally all over the jacket's tags. So why do these words function differently than standard adjectives in this debate?
Well, because in this specific context, they operate as linguistic cloaks. A buzzword is a term that gains massive cultural traction, often sounding scientific or authoritative or deeply ethical.
But there's a catch.
A huge catch. Because these specific terms lack rigid, legally regulated definitions, they can be applied superficially. When the tag says conscious, what does that actually mean operationally?
Nothing, really. It can mean anything.
Exactly. It doesn't legally mean zero emissions. It doesn't legally mean fair wages. It is an emotional trigger word designed to bypass the consumer's critical thinking and induce a feeling of ethical safety.
It effectively masks the contradictory reality of the supply chain.
It's the vocabulary of deception. The words themselves, sustainability, consciousness, those are vital, profound concepts.
But Speaker B argues that when you strip them of operational metrics and just slap them on a mass-produced garment, They become manipulative tools.
And the debate then naturally evolves from there. It moves away from the specific jacket and zooms out to confront the broader systemic friction, the friction between individual responsibility and corporate accountability.
And this is where the debate gets incredibly rich. I want to channel Speaker A for a second, because the material gives them a remarkably grounded, pragmatic defense.
Okay, let's hear it.
And I'm going to use my linguistic turn signal to step into their shoes here, if I can just jump in here.
Oh, very smooth.
Thank you. So the cynicism from Speaker B is completely understandable. But practically speaking, what is the individual consumer supposed to do?
That is the big question.
Right. Speaker A makes the point that an average person living on an average budget simply cannot afford to buy custom-tailored, zero-waste, carbon-neutral clothing for every season. The options are limited.
Very limited for most people.
So shouldn't planting a tree, even if it's part of a flawed corporate system, count for something? Isn't incremental progress better than pure nihilism?
That is the crux of the pragmatist's dilemma. Speaker A is voicing the exhaustion of the modern consumer who feels tasked with solving global crises through their limited purchasing power alone.
It's exhausting.
It is. They are arguing that demanding absolute ideological purity from every single purchase is paralyzing, and therefore partial solutions must be validated.
It's a very strong argument, honestly.
It is. But Speaker B counters by analyzing the architecture of who is actually assigning that guilt. Speaker B argues that the frustration shouldn't be directed at the individual consumer's budget, but at the corporate entities who actively shift the burden of responsibility downward.
Down to the consumer.
Yes. This is the concept of systemic blame shifting. The material uses a brilliant juxtaposition to illustrate this.
Oh, the coffee cup thing.
Yes. Speaker B points out the absurdity of a system that conditions a consumer to feel intense personal guilt for buying a single coffee in a plastic cup, while simultaneously massive multinational corporations are pumping millions of tons of industrial emissions into the atmosphere with zero public accountability.
The disparity in scale is just mind-boggling when you put it like that.
It's astronomical.
And to truly drive home the mathematical absurdity of this disparity, Speaker B uses a specific idiom regarding the company's tree planting initiative. They call it a drop in the ocean.
A drop in the ocean.
Now, we aren't just looking at this as a vocabulary phrase to memorize. We need to analyze what this idiom represents strategically in a debate about systemic impact.
Right. When Speaker B refers to the carbon offsetting effort as a drop in the ocean, they are introducing a metric of scale to dismantle the marketing narrative.
How so?
Well, if a corporation produces massive environmental degradation through its core manufacturing process, but attempts to balance the ledger by planting a few thousand trees, the marketing frames it as a balanced scale.
Like, look, we did a bad thing, but we did a good thing, so we're even.
Exactly. The idiom, a drop in the ocean, shatters that framing entirely. It argues that the positive action is so microscopically dwarfed by the volume of the negative impact that the positive action is rendered functionally meaningless in the grand scheme of the environment.
It's a devastating counterargument because it attacks the math, not the intention. It's not saying planting trees is bad. It's saying the scale doesn't match the damage.
Precisely.
But here is the most important takeaway from this entire section. Because despite the heavy subject matter, despite the intense clash between pragmatism and idealism, the conversation doesn't devolve into a screaming match.
Nobody storms out of the room.
Right. They don't unfriend each other. They use their diplomatic skills to navigate the friction and find common ground.
We see the hedging phrases pay massive dividends here. Speaker B, after delivering this really heavy critique of the corporation, immediately stabilizes the interpersonal dynamic.
What do they say?
They say, I take your point, and I'm definitely not trying to make you feel bad about the jacket. But not to derail your point about budget, I think my frustration is just with how companies shift the blame.
Wow. The emotional intelligence in that string of sentences is staggering.
Let's break it down.
Yeah, so first, I take your point. That validates Speaker A's financial reality and their pragmatic approach. It says, I hear you. You aren't wrong.
Then, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, explicitly removes any perceived personal attack.
Right. It assures Speaker A that they are judging the corporation, not the consumer. They aren't attacking the person in the jacket.
It creates a psychological safe space for the debate to actually resolve. Because Speaker A's defenses are lowered, they don't feel the need to double down on defending the corporation just to protect their own ego.
They are able to absorb the critique objectively.
Exactly. And then they reach their consensus.
Right. Speaker B uses the transition, before we move on from this, to synthesize their core argument, which is that the environment is fundamentally a systemic issue.
It cannot be solved by one person agonizing over a jacket or a coffee cup.
Right. It requires overarching transparency and legislation, moving past the deceptive buzzwords. And Speaker A, because they feel respected rather than attacked, entirely agrees with that conclusion.
They navigated a highly volatile ideological conflict, maintained their professional relationship, and arrived at a deeper, shared understanding of the systemic mechanics at play.
That is the ultimate utility of advanced communicative mastery. It's not just sounding smart. It's keeping the connection while disagreeing.
Completely.
So, man, let's step back and look at the massive amount of ground we have covered today. We started inside the chaotic, anxiety-ridden space of our own minds.
We really dug into
We
it.
dissected imposter syndrome. We explored the illusion of winging it while secretly floundering behind the scenes. And we exposed the ruthless self-sabotage of moving the goalposts on our own achievements.
And crucially, we learned how to redefine competence as the resilience to navigate the unknown.
Yes, the floundering is the job. I love that. And then we translated that internal stability into external power. We examined the mechanics of the boardroom, learning how to use linguistic turn signals, those vital hedging phrases, and diplomatic interruptions.
To assert our ideas without triggering the defensive threat response in our colleagues.
Right, avoiding the pileup on the highway. And finally, we took those tools out into the wild, analyzing how massive corporate entities use language to shape reality.
We explored the greenwashing debate.
We did. The deceptive power of unregulated buzzwords and the stark reality of systemic blame shifting, where corporate PR acts as just a drop in the ocean of actual accountability.
So if we connect all of this directly back to you, the listener, the overarching takeaway is profound.
What's the main thing they should walk away with?
By studying these dynamics, by understanding the psychological weight of words and the strategic deployment of syntax, you aren't just memorizing an advanced vocabulary list.
No, you are doing something much, much bigger. You are essentially learning how to decode the matrix of professional life.
You are equipping yourself with the analytical tools to critically evaluate every single piece of information you encounter. You can recognize when your own internal monologue is lying to you through imposter syndrome.
And you can recognize when a billion-dollar marketing campaign is lying to you through buzzwords.
Furthermore, you are learning how to effectively, respectfully, and powerfully inject your own perspective into any room, no matter how intimidating the environment might be.
It is the ultimate form of professional empowerment. Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something for you to explore on your own that builds on the wild contradictions we've explored today.
The contrast between the individuals and the institutions.
Exactly. Look at the bizarre paradox the material presents to us today. On the one hand, we have these highly competent, meticulously prepared individuals who are silently suffering in boardrooms.
Right, they had the data, they put in the work.
They put in the work, yet their internal language constantly tears them down, convincing them they are total frauds who are just winging it.
They possess deep competence, but they lack the confidence to own it.
Right. But then, on the other hand, we have these massive corporate entities utilizing greenwashing. They are operating with deeply flawed supply chains and massive emissions, yet they project this brazen, completely unearned confidence.
They use buzzwords to aggressively fake their eco-competence to the public, completely untroubled by their own internal flaws.
They possess supreme confidence while sorely lacking actual competence and sustainability.
It's completely backward.
It is exactly backwards. So here is my provocative thought for you to take away today. What if we could completely flip that script?
Okay, I like this.
What if, as a society, we took that harsh, hyper-analytical, deeply critical imposter lens that high achievers constantly turn on themselves, and we pointed it directly at corporate PR campaigns?
Oh, wow.
We force them to prove their competence without the buzzwords. Show us the data, not the feel-good tags. And conversely, what if we gave ourselves, in our own quiet internal monologues, just a fraction of the unearned, brazen, unapologetic confidence of a corporate greenwashing marketing campaign?
That is brilliant. Imagine applying a buzzword level of positivity to your own self-assessment.
Right. I am sustainable. I am conscious of my excellence.
While fiercely demanding meticulous, proven data from the systems and corporations around you, it would completely revolutionize both our individual mental health and our systemic accountability.
It is a wild thought experiment, but changing reality always starts with recognizing the words we use to describe it. As always, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the nuances, keep utilizing your linguistic turn signals, and keep critically examining the language around you.
We'll see you next time.
Remember that internal monologue is a script you have the power to rewrite. Stay curious.